Hey everyone, we are back with another update video, and with me as always is Corey. Say hi, Corey.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
And so let's dive right in. Obviously our focus is and will continue to be on the Megadrive version of Daemon Claw until it is done and in final prep before it gets put on real cartridges. So we'll start there, but please do stay tuned. After all of the Daemon Claw updates, we actually do have some pretty cool news on one of our other projects. Longtime watchers might know that project is called Metro Siege, so there's been quite a lot of movement in that lately, and we'll fill you in after the Daemon Claw news. So the first really big news, to follow up on our previous update video, we had been working on making the first ever playable test build for the Mega Drive version that backers of the Kickstarter could volunteer to test, and the great news is that we got a very good amount of volunteer testers. And there's always that concern, like, do these guys just want early access, or are they actually going to give feedback now that they have access to the game? And the great news is we've been getting fantastic feedback, not just bug reports, but all the things we want, like, is any aspect of the gameplay confusing or frustrating, or like, what do you find the most fun, what do you find the least fun, all of those sorts of things. And we've been getting great feedback already, which means poor NeoFid keeps getting all of the more tickets, and they're doing a great job keeping on top of them. And again, tickets are just the list of specific changes and improvements that we want made before any aspect of the game is considered final. And so I guess that's the other good news, is that's still moving at a very good clip. And at this point, for the Mega Drive version, almost every aspect of the game, like every core feature, is at least partially implemented, and most of them are actually very far along and are just already have been for a while in the iterative state, where you're just replaying and finding other things to improve in every aspect. A lot of times it's gameplay, perfecting timing, programming, looking for harder to find edge case bugs to fix. That's all going really smoothly, and while that is all getting done, NeoFid does continue to make progress with the unfinished thing, but already we're literally at the last level, and the final boss fight of the game are quite decently implemented so far. Not complete, but they're getting there, which is really exciting.
And speaking of the final boss, we do now have the completed Mega Drive soundtrack from Allister Brimble, which is fantastic. It all sounds really great. We're happy to be able to report that.
Yeah, it is awesome. That was the last song for the entire soundtrack that I needed to do for the final boss fight, and he very recently wrapped that up. And staying on topic with Allister Brimble, the great musician of Daemon Claw, what we were able to commission from him was the Mega Drive version of the soundtrack, but he actually volunteered to add some enhancements on top of that and export those as standard modern format, like WAV or something, that we could use for the PC and the Neo Geo version of the game. So going back to the topic briefly of sort of iteration and the kind of polishing process and the way that works with playtesters, there was one example that I really like that happened actually earlier when we released a demo on the Steam Next Fest. There was actually a playable demo for a while, and the coolest thing is sometimes to just see footage of a player playing for the first time without having seen the game before and without having been coached by us how to play. And there was that aspect. I'll see if future Mike that edits this video can find that old footage of me complaining, kind of like, why is this player just continuously walking up to this Ram Man sub boss at the end of level 2 and just keeps hitting the shield? Like, it's this big thick shield, it's this big strong ram guy that's stronger than the hero. Don't you see that's not the way to beat him? And then I realized after the fact, it's like, wow, what a dummy am I. It's like game design 101. It's the job of the game designer to establish and communicate gameplay mechanics and the way gameplay works in your particular game in the early levels, and then you keep up with those themes that you establish. And sure enough, in level 1, all of the Birdmen enemies that have shields, as a part of the way you have to beat them, they're going to end up getting their shields broken. So obviously that it was entirely my fault. I designed level 1 to train the player, you can break their shields, and then In level 2, I introduced the only character with a shield, and sure enough, his shield is completely unbreakable. So Corey and I had a discussion about this, and there were two general solutions, and one of them is obviously make the shield breakable, but that would have also broken the core game design of how we wanted a player to beat that enemy. But then the other option is to make it so that the game communicates by the reactions of that Ram Man to really let the player know that this is not going to work for this guy, to switch things up in the gameplay. But it's all, game design is all about communication to the player, the feedback. It's perfectly fine to surprise someone in a game and kind of change rules you've established, but you kind of need to make that the obvious, and you need to make that the gimmick for this thing.
Right.
And so the thing we came up with for in that regard was every time you hit the sub-boss's shield and he blocks, he'll immediately push back against you, and being a ram man, he'll ram you back with his shield and send you back. We don't want it to be too unreasonable, so it doesn't hurt you, but it pushes you back. So that's a great way to clearly communicate to the player, try something else. But what we also did was we programmed it so you could beat him that way, but it's going to be time consuming, it's not going to be especially fun, and like this is a really thick shield and it takes a lot of hits to break.
Yeah.
That's kind of the best of all worlds. We're communicating to the player that's not the best way to do this, but you can still do it if you're really stuck on the gameplay mechanic that we established in level 1 and you're not figuring out in the moment the other possible ways to beat this enemy. And then after that, the other kind of fun thing about the iterative process is sometimes ideas and ways that further add variety to the gameplay can be accidental. And I can't go into details because it's from the later section of the game that we don't want to spoil or reveal anything of yet. But in a general sense, there was this cool circumstance where I had provided the art and written up in the design doc for NeoFid to program basic enemy for a later level that I had not yet programmed for the PC version. So I couldn't show them how it's working. I just described it with words in the design doc. So let's say there were two core behaviors of this basic enemy. So the gentleman at NeoFid programmed core behavior A and core behavior B, and because of the ways they interpreted what I said, which were perfectly valid ways of interpreting it, it just led to kind of an emergent behavior C, we'll call it. And it was not what I was envisioning and not what I expected, but not only did it make perfect sense, but it made even better sense. Not only like did it add an interesting flavor to the gameplay, which is always great. Like if it plays well and it offers a bigger difference from all the other basic enemies throughout the game, that's like a great bonus. But it also happens, and Corey will understand this, again, we can't spoil it, but the behavior also makes great sense kind of story and plot wise based on what these enemies are. Right. So it just, worked out really well. But I love those accidental discoveries, and it's really important to stay open to changes based on what you were planning. Like it would have been actually a shame if I just saw it really quickly and just typed, this isn't what I meant, do it this way. I would have missed the realization that this is actually better than the idea I had in the first place. Anyway.
I completely agree with that flexibility. I mean, the game mechanic you have in your mind or hypothetical, when you're putting it in practice, it may feel a little different or need to change based on other things around it. And that's when you can really see the light, so to speak. And
that's mostly it for the Megadrive version. We are behind schedule based on the estimated delivery date for the Kickstarter for the Megadrive version, but we are making very strong progress every day. We're hammering away at it, all of us, and we're wrapping up getting everything functional and simultaneously, especially the earlier levels, are getting more and more refined. And obviously we will keep you guys updated as much as possible. And it definitely, we're in good shape to not be like really late, but obviously our bigger concern is when you receive the game, when you're actually able to play the game through, that it just is very high quality and stays fun the whole way through. So obviously that's we'll keep you updated, but that's going smoothly. Similarly on the PC side of things, while I'm not able to focus a ton of time on it because it's really more important to finish the Megadrive version first and finish all the design that NeoFid needs to actually program the final things and make them work. I do continue to make progress on the PC version, polishing everything up, getting the last bit of unfinished stuff working. And the last really big unfinished thing for the PC version, and this kind of spills over to an update on the Neo Geo side, is the second selectable playable character for both the PC version and the Neo Geo. Cool update is Corey and I finalized what those two characters will be, who they will be, how they fit in the canon of the world, and also what they look like, their actual character sprites, right. And then the core aspects of their gameplay that makes them very unique and different when you actually play as them compared to each other and compared to the main character, Elric.
Yeah, and on the art side of Megadrive in general, still continuing along with lots of pixel art and polishing. The last two levels of the game have a lot of special things going on, and I would say it's getting into the realm of something like 90% of the game's art, in-game art, is pretty decently established and decently polished as well, and we're getting into those final stages of not just designing the look of things anymore. Now it's improving the look, and we're, that kind of thing. So yeah.
And that's about it for Daemon Claw at the moment. Now let's roll over to Metro Siege. So the cool news is, for those of you who have been following us a long time, Metro Siege has been an ongoing project for many years. There was this long span of time where, unfortunately, the programmer just had so many other things in his life with day job and family and all that kind of stuff that he just couldn't make much progress at all. And luckily that has changed. And even during all that time, we had already established a large amount of work in progress artwork and game design, so that in those moments where he did have time to work on Metro Siege, he could. But the cool news is, finally, things have settled down in his life where he could start working on Metro Siege again, and he started digging in to that backlog of art that was ready for him and has been making incredibly fast progress. So currently Metro Siege is developing as fast as it ever had been, which is really cool. But because of that, I also felt like we really need to stay on top of this, keep the programmer really motivated, and make sure he never ends up with a bottleneck where he runs out of art and design to continue working with. And so there had been a contract artist that I recently found and started contracting to help us wrap up some loose ends to stay on track with Daemon Claw. And now that we're in good shape with Daemon Claw, I've been moving him over to help clean up and finish some of the work in progress art for Metro Siege. So yeah, it's moving at a really good clip. I won't get into too many specific details right now, but to say that the programmer, to get back into coding, he refamiliarized himself with the code and has done kind of a series of pretty incredible optimizations for both performance and memory usage, which is especially incredible because of how well it had already performed and how optimized it already was. So that was really cool. And basically what that does is it freed up all of the memory that we're going to need to add those final polished features to Metro Siege. And then, like I said, he's basically got back into making actual progress with finishing the rest of the game. And one of the first things he did in that regard is actually chain together the levels in proper sequence, even the ones that are only partially functional with work in progress art. Now you can actually play through the game, and every time you reach the end of one level, you go on to the next level in proper consecutive order. And so there, for the first time ever, I was able to play the game through in its current state. And it was really great to see that despite the fact that the game is still missing all of the unique thugs for the later levels, the basic enemies, sub-bosses, it's missing the future boss fights for the ends of those levels. Despite all that, the game play duration was already very decently long, and it never felt repetitive or anything like that, even though it's currently missing a lot of the really unique stuff each level will offer that'll really keep things fresh. So that's really exciting. The last thing you do when most things are fully designed, you really need to check the pacing of your game, check the difficulty curve, and make sure no level feels too short or too long and kind of gets repetitive, which is something I wish designers had done back in the day more with beat 'em ups. It's, as as you guys know and Corey knows, it's one of my favorite all-time genre of game, especially for multiplayer action games. But almost every one of them, it reaches a point like, 45 minutes in where it's starting to feel more like a chore to finish the game, like an investment. Like, oh, I've been playing this long, it would be crazy if I just stopped playing instead of beating it. Now that there's X amount of minutes.
It was a genre that always had really nice artwork and character designs and everything, but they didn't explore game mechanics too much, and it's a genre that didn't evolve too far in that regard, and I think that's something that you've talked passionately about changing quite a lot and improving. So
I think one of the biggest examples, we did, Corey, a Let's Play of Sengoku 3 for the Neo Geo. Gorgeous art, really cool. They even bothered adding more complexity to the gameplay, like extra special moves you could do in different circumstances. But even with all that, the play duration was so long, and too many of the levels, especially near the end, you were seeing the same exact enemy or the same enemy type over and over and over again.
I think when we played that, our video ended up being like an hour long or something like
that.
Exactly. Maybe even beyond an hour. A couple of other beat 'em ups we played were the same way. They just felt like they went on and on. Took us
and that's like, and that's with the benefit of infinite tokens / continues and stuff like that. And the fact that we've both played beat 'em ups quite a bit before, so it's not like we were playing terribly, although we certainly weren't playing great because we were trying to hold a conversation at the same time and talk about gameplay design decisions and pixel art and all that stuff. And I would say on the outside, an hour is maybe an okay length for an arcade style game, in my opinion. Back then obviously it was also a lot about token munching, making sure you get the most quarters out of the player as you can. But
it's like they designed mechanics for a shorter game.
Exactly.
Into an hour. So if that hour's got a lot of surprises and fun things along the way, then you could justify it easier. But that wasn't a lot of our experiences,
Yeah, like that's the thing. If you're going to make the game take that long, you don't have to keep introducing new moves that the player can do, although that's very cool. You gotta introduce new behaviors and new unique things and surprises in the levels with new enemies. But anyway, so that's basically it for Metro Siege. Obviously, there will be, when we have more time to focus and more things to show, we'll be giving more updates on Metro Siege and that other project that we don't have any really meaningful news about yet, but stay tuned for that. Exciting things to come in the future, but there will definitely in the relatively near future be some cool, more substantive Metro Siege updates that we can show you guys. But that's about it for this update video. Thanks again, as always, so much for watching, and thanks for your support.
If you enjoy our content and want to keep up to date on our games, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, if you want to support our projects, consider becoming a patron. The link's in the description, and we'll see you soon.